We've got a Precinct 1 constable here to talk about this, along with a panel of other individuals right here from the community. We have Constable Alan Rosen, also security expert Hanan Yadin, Shay Everett with Children at Risk, Zeph Capo, and with the American Federation of Teachers, and the president, Louis Hunter, and his son, Alec Hunter, who's in high school, and CODY McCubbin, a former school board member in Newtown, Connecticut, that dealt firsthand with the Sandy Hook shooting and the aftermath. I want to thank you guys for joining us here on The Factor. First of all, Mr. McCubbin, when you see this, your thoughts on this, obviously you're reliving it again.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? It is something that kind of rehashes. These are the kind of things that you never forget. You'll never forget this when you get into this kind of situation. I mean, to be honest, it's something I think about every day. And this is something that's going to affect this community for the rest of their lives. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of trauma that's going to be involved with this. Not just with the parents and not just with the children, but you got to think about the first responders that had to go into that building and see all this carnage firsthand. There's going to be a lot of need for a lot of resources and a lot of just help that this community is going to need to get them through this process, because it's going to be a very long, drawn-out. This is going to take years. This is not going to be something that's going to be resolved like in a month or even in a couple of years. It's going to take a very long time to get it through this kind of situation.
Now, Louis Hunter, one of the things he mentioned, Mr. McCubbin mentioned, was parents and students. You and your son are here today. If you saw this on TV today, knowing that your son could have been in that school or it could happen in any school around the nation, your thoughts as a parent on what we need to do better?
You know, the first thing that comes to mind is that, you know, when will these things ever stop? You know, I doubt they'll ever stop. I can think of something as simple as where access doors outside of the classroom, you know, so that these kids have an access. And that's an easy, you know, way of thinking. But as a father, I want to get into school and get my son. I want him out of the school. And
let's bring your son into this discussion, Alec Hunter. Are you, as students, prepared for something like this? When you see something like this on television, have you been taught in the school what to do, how to respond, how to handle it?
I mean, like, we would have like drills where they would make us, like, they would turn off all the lights and make us go in the back, like, corner of the room where, like, they can't see us from the door, and we'll just sit there for about a minute until they say we're clear. But I don't think you can really, like, fully prepare for something like that. Because, I mean, like, you can't really imagine putting yourself in that situation and, like, just feel the same thing that the actual victims feel until it's actually happening to you.
And that's an important point, Hanan Yadin, who's a security expert, that he brings up. You can never really prepare for anything like this.
You can never be prepared, but eventually the system has to develop doctrines and philosophies of training to bring that kind of drill to the more realistic way it is. I grew up in Israel, where we actually our school were attacked several times by terrorists in Israel, and the school was preparing us as high school students for that kind of situation, what to do, what not to do. They even send some students like me for special training in the military to become actually first responders in the school.
All right, Constable Alan Rosen, is that something that we should look at in this country, where having some students specialized, trained for a situation like this? Also, should we consider metal detectors again all across the country?
I don't think metal detectors, I think metal detectors can help. I don't think metal detectors would have helped in this situation, because the gunman was prepared to go through a metal detector and do as much carnage as he possibly could do. I think that you could train students. I still think it's a teacher would probably be a better person to pick that would be trained on what to do, how to do it. But a school has to have a plan. You have to have a plan, and you got to role play that plan, and you've got to continually do it. We used to have fire drills in school back when I was young, and now we unfortunately have to have these types of drills, because you can save lives. It's been proven time and time again that if you have a plan and you practice that plan, it will save lives. So we have to look at the entire picture. I don't think that metal detectors alone would have stopped this. Having a law enforcement officer there would have bought law enforcement time to get there and deal with the threat. But this kid was pretty sinister. And we really need to have, again, I say this all the time, a real discussion about gun laws. This kid was 18 years old when he got this assault rifle. He couldn't buy a handgun in Texas, but he could buy an assault rifle in Texas.
Let's bring in Shay Everett to this conversation with children at risk. Is it time to discuss gun control? And from your perspective, what do you see as the best route for protecting our children in schools?
Well, I think that you can do so much to plan for this and to have police and have different plans for students and teachers and trainings. However, you're putting a bandage on a wound that's already bleeding. What needs to happen is we need perhaps to accept that we live in a gun culture. And if we're going to do that, then we need to make sure that these students who may have serious mental health issues or normal teen angst and access to a gun, make sure that they have access to counselors and people who can provide specialized assistance and support to them. And that means funding for this in schools and help with parents and help at home. And all of this can mitigate the problem before it even gets so far as to becoming violent in the school.
Let's bring in Zeb Caffo, who is the president for the Houston Federation of Teachers and a teacher yourself. Do you guys have what you need to counsel and guide young people who are in the classroom who may have some mental issues or who may have that angst, as Shay says?
Our teachers have some level of expertise in being able to identify and understand their students, but they are nowhere near equipped and necessary to be able to deal with some of the issues that we're seeing in students that are going to commit acts like this. We need to have good, training to be able to indicate potential issues, but we need to have strong resources that we can send those kids to, that we can get to address their needs. Unfortunately, we have a group of people in Austin and Washington that would rather make gun access easier and cut off funding that we would be using to ensure that counselors and nurses were available and social workers on our campuses.
Let's bring Mr. McCubbin back in, who has experienced Sandy Hook. Do you think it's time we take a look at the issue of gun control, or is that a no hands-on conversation for this country?
Well, look, after Sandy Hook, if it wasn't going to get discussed, it's not going to, right? I mean,
and why is that? We've seen mass shootings and school shootings time and time again, and it just won't get done.
Well, I mean, let's be really honest. It's the Second Amendment. Are you going to really ratify the Constitution and overturn all the strict gun control like you're going to do?
Or do you just sit around and watch children die?
I mean, look, I think this is a debate, an argument that's been going on for years, and if not decades, and it's going to go on probably a lot longer. I guarantee you that whoever this person is that was in Florida, they knew about him, right? They knew this guy was a problem. In Sandy Hook, we had a little bit of a different situation where this individual was hiding in a basement for years and nobody had ever seen this kid, and then he came out of nowhere. But in these kind of situations, I think there are warning signs and there are things that people know. I guarantee you there were people that were very aware of what this kid was probably planning out and trying to do, and nobody said anything. And that's when people have to not just be these kind of bystanders that kind of look at it and say, oh, it can't happen here, because guess what? It happens, and it happens often.
And Lewis, we always hear time and time again, hear something, say something, but no one ever says anything.
No one ever does, and what frustrates me is if my kid gets a hold to my beer and takes it to school, I'm going to be held accountable if I give him access to things that are mine, that are for adults. But he can grab, if he has access to a weapon, just the discussion of gun control, kind of puts a block to resolving these things. So it's cyclical, and it always ends with mass shootings and a bunch of kids getting killed. As far as assault weapons, personally, I'm against assault weapons, personally. I don't think the average civilian needs an assault weapon. I think it brings about a bravado. I think it brings about an ego. And it's, for what? For what? And you've got children, they get sucked into that culture. And I've asked Alec several times, in school, he's got friends that will brag about their access to certain guns, the types of guns, how many rounds per minute, things that kids really shouldn't be taking too much pride in. But because if your father's into something, then you're going to be into that too. If your father's into muscle cars, you know everything there is to know about muscle cars. And I think that we live in a culture where there are a lot of dads, unfortunately, that are so wrapped up in the bravado of guns. And I'm talking high-powered assault weapons that their kids are as well.
Hanan, let's ask you, when we take a look at the gun issue here in America, is that part of the problem from your perspective as a security expert, or should we do more to prepare?
I look at the situation more of the security of the schools. I think I'm looking at the Columbine High School, which is happened about 19 years ago. Shooting in schools didn't stop. Shooting in schools actually increased. Law enforcement become more and more prepared, more and more efficient. They react faster, they train much better, they have better equipment. But I didn't see much improvement in school security. I've been around quite a while and taking the Israeli model and kind of more or less compare it to what happened in the United States. The schools are not secured in the United States. So the key should be prevention. How to prevent from somebody like this guy, this kid, to get close to the school with an assault weapon or any type of weapon. Schools should be safe regardless of the threat. If it is a knife, if it is a weapon, you know, a firearm, a bomb, a knife. I don't see much improvement in that field.
All right, Hanan Yadin, we want to thank you all for coming on The Factor Uncensored and for having this conversation with us. We still have a very long way to go.